Good morning. Welcome to Monlogues. I'm Judy. This is Bob. And we're so happy to see your faces, to see you here. And it's going to be so much fun to listen to you all. And the ones that are listening, you're here. Yay. So I have a little one this morning I'd like to start with. It won't take me really long. But that's our boat. Now, when we first bought her, that's Autumn Voyager, we took her down from Chatham, Massachusetts to Fort Lauderdale. We sailed her down, and there was a boatyard there that we had an appointment with to do a little bit of work we wanted on our new boat. So we were going to leave her at Summerfields. Now, we're in Fort Lauderdale now. I think there's some people who've been in Fort Lauderdale before. And this was where the waterway had mansions either side. We sailed down that. And then we went up a little, not really a creek, but a smaller waterway to get to Summerfields. And there was a dock ready for us there. However, I had the helm. This is a woman's story. I wanted to tell a woman's story this morning because this is a woman's story. This was 23 years ago. I had the helm, took that boat up there. I had to take a starboard turn, sharp starboard turn, to get into my slip, which the dock was like this. At the end of the dock was a big, wasn't a Hinkley, Hylas, big Hylas, 50-footer, and its stern was sticking out a little bit into where I had to turn into. And then there was a oyster boat, a very expensive sailboat on the other side. So I had to take a quick starboard turn, put that boat in there without touching anybody else. I had 6 inches on either side of me. Put her in, didn't touch a thing. He threw the lines over to the dock hands, who almost fell off the dock because they realized that a woman had done this. And you know what? Hey girls, isn't that swell? So, you just have to think, we've come a long way, baby, and we have had a good time doing it, so we all have our tales.
Judy?
Yeah?
The part where the guy offered to marry you.
I'm sorry?
The dock guy offered to marry you?
Not that one, but another one did. That was a time, Carol, you remember, that we came into Stage Harbor to our mooring. We had our Dickerson catch, and I dropped the mizzen, and I dropped the jib, and I had the mainsail only. And I went in to our mooring. This wasn't a dock, a mooring. And there was a whole group of boats from the Duxbury Sailing Club that had come in and picked up moorings in the harbor. They were all visitors. And as I got to the mooring, I had luffed the mainsail enough that I stopped the boat exactly on the mooring.
No motor.
No motor. Oh no, I just had my mainsail going. And he picks up the mooring, just reaches down and goes like this, because I stopped the boat smack on it with just luffing the main. And one of the guys on the visiting boat said to another one, "Hey, Charlie, did you see that?" And Charlie responded, I assume, or the other guy did, "I'd marry a woman who could do that." That's the one Carol's thinking about. She and I have exchanged a lot of stories. We're like sisters. Anyway, so, okay, we have a wonderful group today. Remember, 7 to 10 minutes. We'd love to hear you. First speaker is Janice Fontaine. She doesn't have Mark in front of her. Sandy Tarbox is number 1 today. Hey, Sandy.
I have a cousin down in Florida, and he always sends me little jokes and all kinds of things, and some of them I can tell and some I can't. And so he sent me this, and I thought it was kind of funny, so I thought I would share it with you. These are lost words and old phrases from our childhood. And a friend and I recently reminisced about some old expressions that have become obsolete, many because of the march of technology. These phrases include, "Don't touch that dial," "carbon copy," and "you sound like a broken record," and "hung out to dry." Murgatroyd, do you remember the word? Would you believe that the spell checker program does not recognize the word Murgatroyd? Heavens to Murgatroyd. The other day, I overheard a not-so-elderly 75-year-old lady say to her son about talk to her son about driving a jalopy. And he said, "What's a jalopy?" I never heard of a jalopy. And she knew she was old, but not that old. Well, I hope you are hunky-dory after you hear some of these and chuckle. Back in the olden days, we had a lot of moxie. We put on our best bib and tucker and straighten up and fly right. Heavens to Betsy, gee Williker, jumpin' Jehoshaphat, holy molies, although I still say that one. A little throwback. We were in like Flynn and living the life of Riley. Back in the olden days, life used to be swell. But when was the last time anything was swell? Swell has gone the way of beehives, page boys, DAs, spats, knickers, fedoras, poodle skirts, saddle shoes, and pedal pushers. I'm still looking for pedal pushers. Kilroy was here, but he isn't anymore. We wake up from we wake up from what surely has been a short nap, and before we can say, "Well, I'll be a monkey's uncle," or "It's a fine kettle of fish," we discovered that the words we grew up with and the words that seem omnipresent like oxygen had vanished, and scarcely a notice from our tongue and our pen or the keyboards. Poof, there goes our youth. The words we've left behind. In a blink, and they're gone. We have all those great phrases gone. Long gone. The milkman did it. Hey, it's your nickel. We blink and they're gone. Pull your chain, knee high to a grasshopper. Well, fiddlesticks. Going like 60. I'll see you in the funny papers. Don't take any wooden nickels. Wake up and smell the roses. It turns out that there are more of these lost words and expressions than Carter has pills. This can be disturbing stuff. Little Carter pills are gone too. Leave us to wonder where Superman's gonna find a phone booth. See you later, alligator. Okie dokie. You'll notice left out is monkey business. We are the children of the fabulous 50s. No one ever will have the opportunity again. We were given the most precious gift, living in a peaceful and comfortable time, created for us by the greatest generation.
Oh,
Thank you, Sandy. Okay, for our next speaker, we have one who has many presentations, Michael Volin.
A man spoke here a few months ago. His name was Arthur. I knew him because I played ping pong with him at the senior center, and we were really competitive. And he also had different points of view about the Middle East, where he taught. But he told a story about Afghanistan, and a small story about traveling in Afghanistan and Pakistan. And it reminded his experience reminded me of a book that I had read 3 years ago or so, 4 years ago, and I'd forgotten about, and that I enjoyed immensely. And I thought I might tell you about this book. It's about Afghanistan before there was any trouble from the Taliban or Russia. It was Afghanistan in the 1950s. It was a peaceful, sort of a stable country. And it told about, it's one of the greatest adult sports stories I ever read. In Afghanistan, one of the big skills and an athletic ability that people of Afghanistan seem to love, according to this novel, is horsemanship. Afghanistan is a pasture country in certain areas. They raise sheep and cattle and horses. They have great horses, great riders and great horses. So this book I have is about a game that they play. I never heard of it, probably you never heard of it. It's a game played from on a field 1 mile in one direction, 1 mile in the other direction, and there's its width is enough to have ample room for riding, and the number of people who play can be from 10 to 70 or 80. The story in this book is about the king decides to have this game, which is usually played in the prairie area in Kabul. And so it's a story about a great, great athlete who's the son of a great, great athlete. And the sport, I forgot the name of the sport. It's what they do is that they have on this field, they have just a horse, a rider and a horse. Very, very skilled rider and very, very skilled horse for this game. They take a sheep, and they cut it open on the belly, and they empty the insides out so it could be carried, so a man could carry it in one hand. And they sew it together. Then the game starts. The referee starts in a circle in the middle of the field, and he drops the sheep, and some rider grabs it, and he goes off in one direction, and he tries to reach a pole a mile away. Then all the other riders are trying to grab it. So you can't have 70 riders going after one little thing. So the riders station themselves somewhere on the course, and when the man who's carrying the horse, carrying the sheep, passes him, they try to knock him over. They're not allowed to kill him, but they're allowed to elbow, and the horse works against the other horse, so that so sheep is dropped. And during this game, many riders have the sheep, and they're chased, and then it drops, and another man picks it up. And they go to whoever has it at a mile away. You pick it up, and they ride back to the center. Then they ride a mile the other way. And finally, whoever has the sheep, when they come back to the middle of the field, he's the winner.
Oh.
And this game, they have one game described as national championship that they have at Kabul. And this seems like a primitive game, but the strategy in this game is very intricate. It's a very skilled game, and it's a great, great game. I read it with pleasure. I enjoyed it. The name of the book is The Horseman. It's by Joseph Kessel. And one of the pleasures of reading the book is about a peaceful Afghanistan. And the other pleasure is about the psychology of a great athlete, who's the son of a great athlete. It's about competition between a father versus a son. And one of the great pleasures of this book is the relationship that can develop between a man and his horse. I've read Western stories. The closest to this game is Western stories of cowboys. It's fascinating, the relationship, the love a man can have for his horse, and the love a horse can have for the man if he deserves it. So I'm not going to tell the story about this book because it's too short a time. But this man, this great athlete, the son of a great athlete, is in this race, he hopes to take the crown away from his father and assume it himself. And he has an accident and he loses. And he doesn't win the championship. And now he's got to go back home with his ego very badly hurt. And it's a story, most of the book is a story of his returning home with an injured leg. He falls and he has a bad injury. And he's supposed to rest to keep it to heal, and he doesn't rest. He goes back home to meet his father. And this could be Mickey Mantle. The psychology of a great athlete who loses in a big event, he goes back home to face a father that he's been trying to please. It's a great story. And one of the tensions of the book is whether this man is going to get back home and save his leg, because his leg is full of pus, and he keeps riding home because he's stubborn. A great athlete is stubborn. Well, you're short of time, so that's the book. I just want to say one more thing on another subject. When both in this room, we're both speakers and listeners. The listener can do a great service for a speaker. Speakers are exposed in this microphone and they have tender egos and sometimes big egos. So as a listener, we can all help each other to encourage one another. There's a lady here who encouraged me to come today. So it's a great thing if we can encourage fellow speakers.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Our next speaker is a regular, Rona Hovasapian.
As you all know, my sister's the writer in the family, and every so often I have nothing else to say, and I call her and say, "What have you got for me?" And so this is one of the things that she sent me yesterday, and I even asked her to print it big, so, because I was not good with the computer. This is called Demolition Decisions. Unlike older cities in the United States and Europe, where buildings are restored when they fall into disrepair, Florida tends to tear down buildings altogether and start fresh. This has led to a proliferation of demolition companies, some of which specialize in explosive demolition of tall office buildings, while others concentrate on smaller buildings up to 3 stories high, including single-family homes. Once the demolition contract is signed and the owner of the property has removed whatever items he wants to keep, the demolition company owns whatever is left, including all of the materials which can be recycled, including copper pipe and other construction materials. Over the course of 20 years working in demolition in Florida, Wayne, who is her son, operated a track hoe tearing down these smaller buildings. While working with some of these companies, he brought home various discarded or abandoned items which would have ended up deposited in a landfill by one of the many dump trucks he loaded at the site, with the detritus of demolished homes, office buildings, shopping centres, or storage buildings. He even adopted an abandoned kitten which followed him home from one home to the next, looking for a handout from his lunch pail as he demolished an entire closed mobile home park. Many years ago, while working for one of these demolition companies, he and a co-worker, Donnie, were told to meet the owner of the company at a single-family home in Fort Lauderdale. When they showed up at 8 a.m., their boss was already there, going through the belongings of a very old, disabled lady who had been found dead in her bed one morning by her aide. Apparently her family, who lived in another state, wanted nothing to do with the old house or the contents. They just wanted a vacant lot, which they could sell. After about 20 minutes, their boss announced, "There's nothing here of any value, just make sure you separate out the copper pipe and steel you find and send the rest to the dump as usual. I'll arrange for the dump trucks to be here by early afternoon. You should be able to get everything done and cleared up by the end of the day. I need you at a building on Davie Boulevard tomorrow morning." Wayne did his own quick check of the house, ending up in the small master bedroom. He then turned to Donnie and said, "Let's get everything demolished, including the roof, but don't do this bedroom until the very end." "Why?" said Donnie with a frown. "The old lady lived in this room, in that bed, and if there's anything valuable here, it's under the bed." So, sure enough, in the late afternoon, when they removed the roof rubble from the bed and pulled up the mattress and box spring, they were almost asphyxiated, even with their dust masks in place, by the stench of the urine-saturated boxes and bags which had been hidden under the bed. Picking up one of the small bags in his work glove-protected hands, Wayne held his breath as he opened the surprisingly heavy bag. "Bingo!" he said, opening the bag all the way so that Donnie could see the silver coins rested inside. "If this is any indication of what the rest of us of these," he said, pointing to the stinky mess, "we just hit the jackpot." "But what about the boss?" said Daddy. "Shouldn't we let him know?" "He told us there was nothing here of value, just to make sure we saved the copper pipe and any steel, as if we didn't already know that. Everything else was to go to the dump. If we hadn't saved this room for the last, we would have just collapsed the roof and the walls onto the bed, scooped everything up in the loader, and sent it to the dump." That night, at Wayne's house, Donnie, Wayne, and his wife Maureen, wearing masks and rubber gloves, emptied all of the containers into 5-gallon buckets of hot soapy water and scrubbed the contents clean. Some of the coins were fused together after being soaked in urine probably for years. They did manage to salvage some collector coin sets, and they divided those up. However, the majority of the coins were taken to a silver buyer in Boca Raton, and since the price of silver was quite high at the time, Wayne and Donnie each netted a little over $5,000. Not bad for a day's work and a little forethought.
Okay, thanks, Rona. That's a dream, 5,000 for a day, okay. Joyce Schroeder is with us this morning, and she's our next speaker. Morning, Joyce, thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
My story is called Emily, and it's about someone that I met almost 50 years ago who pops into my consciousness every time I'm in New York City. I met her during a summer vacation. I got a job at a Greek coffee shop ice cream parlor in my neighborhood. I remember that summer well because my sister got married to her high school sweetheart, and I was her maid of honor, so there was lots of excitement as we planned the wedding. This job was ideal for me because it let me work on my summer tan. I could lay out in the sun every morning because my job didn't start until mid-afternoon. Now, this was a Greek restaurant owned by a guy named Gus. I had no experience. It was probably my smile and my innocence that led him to hiring me. Gus could be a story of his own with his broken English. Every morning he greeted me with, "De ganis googlamo," which means, "How are you, good looking?" and every night he ended with a bottle of ouzo, often offering me a shot. I had no prior restaurant experience, and my trainer was going to be the waitress who worked the day shift. Her name was Emily. It might have been Gus's restaurant, but it was Emily's kingdom. She was so competent and enthusiastic in her job. You could tell it gave her a strong sense of self to be such a good waitress. Now, Emily was small, about 5'2". She was Hispanic. She was born in Puerto Rico. She had long, kinky hair that she always combed neatly in a ponytail at the base of her neck. And she was almond-colored, and she had little freckles on her nose and her cheeks. And her 2 front teeth were almost too big for her mouth. She was probably about 4 years older than me, married with a little girl, and she lived in one of those apartments that are over stores, and it was on the same block as this restaurant. So it worked for her because she couldn't drive and she didn't have a car. Unlike Gus, Emily didn't like me at first. She viewed me with suspicion, this tall, waspy college girl. I started working behind the counter, so she begrudgingly taught me how to make ice cream sundaes and egg creams and banana splits. She taught me how to ring up the checks, how to place orders, and how to carry multiple plates. And over time I won her over because I treated her like the boss, and I worked hard. And we slowly became work buddies. Part of Emily's charm was she knew most of the customers by name and would have their coffees ready for them as soon as they walked in. She also had a lot of nicknames for the regulars. The one nickname that I remember was for this elderly gentleman. She called him the Professor. And he came in every day and sat in the same seat, and he never said anything. There were lots of nicknames, and then there was a regular who came in every day, whose name was Dutch. Now, Dutch worked as a mechanic. He came in every day and, like Norm and Cheers, sat in the same seat, and everyone said hello, and Emily had his coffee with 3 sugars waiting for him. I guess it's an occupational hazard, but as a mechanic, he was always covered in grease and had really dirty fingernails. But Emily treated him like royalty, and he was in love with Emily. I watched him flirt with her, and I watched her bask in his attentions. And as the summer progressed, she confided in me that she had feelings for Dutch. Now, it was beyond my comprehension that anyone could find him attractive, but it was also hard to hear because she was married with a child. The summer came to an end, my sister got married, and Emily and I exchanged contact information so we could keep in touch. And I went back to college in upstate New York. About 2 months into the fall term, I got a call from Emily. She wanted to know whether she and Dutch could use my apartment for a tryst. Now, there were lots of reasons why I said no. You know, first of all, I shared the apartment with 2 other women. I mean, where was this going to happen? But second, I couldn't support her having an affair. She was a mother with 2 children. And finally, there was a blurring of the lines. You know, she was a friend in the coffee shop, but she didn't fit into my preppy college life. This was my final year of school, so I graduated from college and I returned to New York and I got a job at an advertising agency. I moved into Manhattan a year later and I had no contact with Emily during that period of time. I had a great career in advertising. I was on a fast track. I worked in big advertising agencies, and then I moved to a career in advertising sales, working in magazines such as Cosmopolitan and Cuisine and Tennis. I had a huge expense account, $16,000 a year. I thought that was a lot, which allowed me to entertain my clients at the best and most expensive restaurants. Do you remember that Thomas Wolfe book, Bonfire of the Vanities, where he talked about masters of the universe? I mean, that's how my coworkers and I felt. We felt we were masters of the universe. You know, we had our meetings in boardrooms, you know, the restaurants, the parties, the cabs, the apartments. And knowing people, I couldn't go anywhere in New York City without running into someone I knew. About 10 years after I graduated from college, I was on a subway. I was in my business suit and I had my briefcase and I was looking at my diary. We didn't have cell phones back then. I was looking at my diary to check my appointments for the day. And the door of the subway opened and a woman and her about 10-year-old son entered. They were panhandlers. Now this woman looked familiar, and as soon as she opened up her mouth, I knew. This was Emily. She had the teeth, the freckles, the ponytail, and the boy, he looked like Dutch. Seeing them took my breath away, and my eyes welled up with tears. She was begging for money, saying she was homeless and needed food to feed her son. I didn't know what to do. This makes me cry. I didn't know what to do. You know, if she was just an old acquaintance on the subway, I would have said, "Hi, Emily." But I didn't want to embarrass her, and frankly, I didn't want to be recognized. So I kept my head down, and when she came to me for collections, I just handed her a $20 bill without looking up. And like most panhandlers, you know, they work one car, the doors open, and then they move to the next one. So I was very grateful that she left. And when she left, I couldn't stop crying. You know, it made me wonder what happened to her. You know, she obviously consummated her relationship with Dutch. Did her husband kick her out? You know, did she lose custody of her daughter? You know, what choices did she make? What experiences did she have that led her to being homeless and destitute? I remember a really hard worker. I remember someone who taught me, who had so much energy, who was so good at her job. For days I found myself thinking about her and the unfairness of life. You know, I was born a white person into an intact family. We lived in a middle-class neighborhood in a lovely home. I always had enough to eat and clean clothes to wear. It was my parents' expectation that I would go to school and I'd do well, go to college, and I'd get a job in which I could support myself. And frankly, I exceeded my parents' expectations. And then there's someone like Emily, a brown person, an immigrant, who had minimal education. I had so many options because of my privilege, options that Emily didn't have. That cocky woman on the subway, my younger self, the one who thought she was a master of the universe, suffered many setbacks over the years. I had to declare bankruptcy, my marriage fell apart, my ex-husband was a deadbeat, so I had to take him to court to get child support. I had cancer, and then rebuilding my life as a single mom, working and trying to be the best mother I could be. You know, any one of these events could have been my undoing. Yes, I had a lot of drive, but I had a foundation upon which I could build a family, a community, and a good education. Whenever I see panhandlers asking for money, I think of Emily. Everyone has their backstory that led to them being on the street. And I think, there but for the grace of God, go I.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Our next speaker, used to run Monlogues, and he is, by special invitation, he gets here because he doesn't live here anymore. But we'll welcome Charlie Rippel.
Thank you. Thank you for that story. Very impressive. Good morning. It's good to see a good group here. Always a good group. In the words of Victor, where else on the universe could you find a group like this? Sharing their stories, compelling stories, truthful stories, only in Heritage Village. This morning I'm going to speak to, I'm glad you can stay past 10:30. We mentioned Jacques Cousteau. Anybody remember the name Jacques Cousteau? In the 30s, he invented the scuba gear. You know what that stands for? Yes. Self-contained.
Self-contained breathing apparatus. During the 30s, he was an explorer underwater, and you could only go down so far. And then your lungs started feeling pressure, and he developed this device, and it was copied by the Navy in the Second World War, and that developed the frogmen routines. My late wife and I, we used to go to a lot of beach fronts from Maine to Florida, and we spent some time in Virginia Beach. And walking along the shore, probably around midnight, hand in hand, feet in the water, and we saw red lights and green lights about a mile or two out on the black surface of the ocean. And we stopped for ice cream. And we mentioned this, what are the lights all about? Well, Little Creek, Virginia is close by, and that was the training headquarters for the frogmen.
Oh.
And the frogmen were the ones that were dropped off during the Second World War. It was an elite team of like specialists in the Navy, and they tested the defenses of the enemy in the Pacific before invasions, and also in the European theater. They would be dropped off by PT boats, lights off, dead of night, put their packs on, drop into the water, and swim underwater to enemy territory. They would mark down, they had their special equipment for write down the enemy fortifications so far as the tank traps go, and the mines, and the barbed wire, and things like that would hold an invasion force from coming and stop them in their tracks. The master of all underwater technology development so far as the bathysphere and the equipment that will take you deep into the ocean is Dr. Robert Ballard. Lives on Cape Cod, and you happen to know...
He's our next door neighbor.
Next door neighbor. Little world. Dr. Ballard discovered the Titanic, and that was 1985. And there was always a question, even from the survivors of the Titanic, did the ship break up on the surface or on the way down? And what is it like at the bottom of the ocean? And he developed the bathysphere and a lot of the technology that could go and explore with the lights on the deepest part of the oceans. And people wonder how deep is the ocean? It used to be a song during the 1940s. How deep is the ocean? How high is the sky? And the deepest part of the ocean is deeper than Mount Everest is tall. 29,000 feet up in the air, 36,000 feet to the bottom. Dr. Ballard went into the invention of the gear where he exposed the bottom of the ocean off the Mariana Trench in Guam, 36,000 feet deep. All types of fish and sea life and things you could never imagine were all photographed and documented. Dr. Ballard also had traveling, I won't say shows, traveling exhibitions. We saw one down in Tampa, Florida, about the Titanic. Worldwide, 5,000 objects were discovered on the seafloor from the Titanic. The ship broke apart as it went down, and the two halves landed upright about a half-mile apart. And all of the things that are on the ocean floor, china, silverware, leather briefcases, anything that couldn't dissolve in the algae and the cold water was photographed. But the monuments of the victims of the Titanic in the two halves were never disturbed. That becomes a monument, and usually they have plaques on these sunken ships. From the outside you can explore, but you don't go inside, and that's it. And like I said, 5,000 different artifacts, and worldwide trips with Dr. Ballard. And he has a place in Mystic, at least he did have a couple of years ago, and it was a replica of the deck of the Titanic. And you stepped out on the deck and you could see the stars, and all of a sudden the deck would start moving and tilting and give you the feeling of people going down aboard the Titanic. Dr. Ballard also discovered the remains of the Bismarck, Hitler's favorite battleship, the Lexington, the Saratoga, the Yorktown. Yorktown was sunk off Midway by a Japanese submarine torpedo, and they brought Japanese sailors back from the Second World War that wanted to see what some of the remains of the giant battleships that the Japanese had in the Second World War, the Gulf of Leyte, the Yamamoto, and the Musashi, the largest battleships ever on the action scene. Dr. Ballard was also hired by Russian authorities. I think this was back in the 60s or so. In the Black Sea, Catherine the Great's art treasure was sunk, and they wanted to save this. Now, how in the world can artwork being submerged in the salt water for almost 200 years? Well, back then they wrapped them in plastic. Not plastic, they didn't have plastic. They wrapped them in fiber, and then they soaked them in wax. And this was completely waterproof. And they brought them up, and they're in the museums in Russia today. He did many things. He discovered Roman galleys, Greek galleys in the Mediterranean. They brought up urns and statuary that were buried not buried, it was part of sunken wrecks for over 2,000 years. You go back to the before in Bible days, so far as the Greeks and the Romans. But a magnificent man, and laid back and quiet, and the father of technology for underwater exploration. Thank you very much.
Always a font of history. Our next speaker, Greorgeann Colin.
I wrote this probably about 6 or 7 years ago, and I know I read it here at that time. I read it here at that time, so some of you may have remembered. But the reason I decided to read it today is because tomorrow is May 6th. It's called A Day to Remember. When I was 7 years old, my mother would come to see me on her day off from work. She was a switchboard operator in a hotel in New York City, and she worked nights. One day we went into New York City. It was a nice, clear, blue sky day. We took the subway downtown and walked upstairs to Battery Park, which is situated on New York Harbor. You could take a boat ride to the Statue of Liberty, and there was an old aquarium down on Battery Park. As we stood there looking out over the water, a huge, and I mean huge, dirigible or blimp appeared in the sky. and seemed to hover right over our heads. It was so low that you could see the compartment underneath where the passengers were. We were all waving at them, and yet the size and noise of it frightened me because I had never seen one so close. After hovering a while, it flew off toward New Jersey. Both of us continued on our way. In those days, we did not have TV, so we relied on the daily newspaper and radio for our current news. After I got back to my home, I found everyone upset and sad. They heard on the radio about the horrible crash of the Hindenburg that had come back down from the sky in Lakehurst, New Jersey. It had burst into a ball of fire, all on board, killing all on board, and we had seen it about an hour before the tragic crash. I have always remembered that day and grieved for all those souls up in the sky on a happy voyage who lost their future and their lives on May 6th, 1937.
Wow.
Now this past week or two, I did a lot of research on the Hindenburg. And the Hindenburg was a transatlantic travel vehicle, and it was a first, and it went from Germany to the United States. It had lavish accommodations. It had a fine dining room and a beautiful lounge, 50 passengers and a crew of 30, and it cost $400 to take the flight. The airship displayed swastikas on its fins, a symbol for the power of the Hitler Third Reich. 804 feet in length, framework was 10 stories high. The Germans filled the Hindenburg with 7 million cubic feet of highly volatile hydrogen gas, and instead of fireproof helium. The highly inflammatory covering was ignited by the spark and not a hydrogen leak that marked the end of passengers flying on Zeppelins. An opinion was held that a spark of electricity ignited from hydrogen seeping from the ruptured gas bag, but that was not a true statement. It took 34 seconds for the ship to become a burning heap of debris. 35 passengers and crew members and 1 victim on the ground perished in the blaze.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, and we'll keep those souls in our prayers. Debby Eisenman, thank you for being here.
There were 2 baby boys.
We have Mother's Day coming up. It's a very significant holiday because many, many years ago, on a Sunday at 11:57 p.m. on Mother's Day, I was born. I wondered what constitutes a mother, and I did a little reading. Abraham Lincoln said, "I remember my mother's prayers, and they have always followed me. They have clung to me all my life." George Washington, "My mother was the most beautiful woman I ever saw. All I am, I owe to my mother. I attribute my success in life to the moral, intellectual, and physical education I received from her." Rudyard Kipling, "God could not be everywhere, and therefore he made mothers." Then, this is written, the author's unknown, "Being a mama can be tough, but in the eyes of your child, No one does it better than you. What summed it up for me was something that appeared in the local newspaper by columnist Lori Boardman. Being a mother, days of heartache, days of joy. It was C Day in kindergarten recently, C being for career. Kids came dressed as the career they wanted to have when they grew up. A 6-year-old granddaughter who sports a mop of curly auburn hair, eats like food is a full-body contact sport, yet is built like a string bean, went wearing jeans, a long-sleeve shirt, her hair pulled back with a pink polka dot headband, a green apron, a yellow baby carrier strapped to her chest on top of the apron, a Madeline doll tucked inside the baby carrier, and a toy cell phone protruding from a back pocket. Mom. That's what she wants to be when she grows up, a mother, just like her mother. Did I mention that the kid is sweet, funny, playful, and can shoot a look that can melt steel? The school never called, so I guess nobody challenged her on wanting to be a mom. Nobody told her to aim higher or to think outside the box. The kid is already in training. The family has an aquarium full of fish. She keeps a close eye on them, monitoring them, watching them, naming them, predicting which ones will have the next babies, and telling her dad when some of the fish are bullies and nibble on other fish's fins. Fish today, infants tomorrow. Everybody starts somewhere, right? What does it take to be a mom? You know, besides being cute headbands and a cell phone in your rear pocket, it takes everything. Everything you're willing to give. Everything you're not willing to give. And then some. If you've ever seen one of those old iron rug beaters women used a century ago to beat carpets with, that's what being a mom feels like some days. There are days when motherhood simply beats everything you've got right out of you. Of course, there are also wonderful, memorable, frozen time days, receiving sweet handwritten notes and drawings of yourself where you look like an alien. Days when someone picked the towels off the bathroom floor without being told. An adolescent opens up without the slightest coercion. Someone says thank you. A grown child phones just to check in and say hello. Like all of life, motherhood is a mix. At times, being a mom may be the hardest job you'll ever have. The greatest heartache you may ever know. And the deepest well of joy and satisfaction that you cannot imagine. There are days motherhood fills your heart with such love and wonder, you think that you might just explode. But you don't. Because after you'd exploded, you'd be the one cleaning it up. One of the greatest things any mother can teach a child is how to keep going through every sort of a day, rain or shine. Happy Mother's Day, moms. Keep going.
Thank you. We got just a little bit to wait for Mother's Day. Our next speaker is Pam Cleary.
Good morning.
Good morning, Jim.
My wife Pamela is the poet in the family. she'll be up later. But back many years ago in my teenage years, I wrote some poetry. It was all pretty bad, except there was a couple poems that if you present them the proper way, you might not realize how bad they actually were. I have those two today. The first one is entitled From the Heart. Love, they say, comes from the heart. But what a place for love to start. Instead of coming from the brain, love grows alongside of ulcer pains. The head would seem the likely place, for loveliness is in a face. Each other boys and girls do eye, hug and kiss in sweet goodbye. So why not share each other's head instead of hearts of bloody red? Tradition must be truly nuts to say that love comes from the guts. In love, I give my heart to you, with kidneys, liver, intestines too. And we can live in love so free, so long as you can stomach me. Now, that's the first one. Now, the second one, you have to keep in mind that this was written when I was a teenager, back before I knew how bad they were. And this is called Love. I had a lot of love on my mind when I was a teenager. I finally found the girl for me, but feelings incomplete. Our love could grow much deeper, but stick shift and bucket seats. How can we be together? How can our love uplift if every time I reach for her, I also clutch and shift? The drive-in is our second home, but oh, this is not too keen. It's hard to hold her close and tight with a gear shift in between. But now I've solved our problem. Our love will now attract. You see, the front is bucketed, but full length in the back. Thank you.
Well, Pamela Cleary, do you have anything to say to that?
As a matter of fact, I do.
I could picture that young couple and imagine what happened to them later on in life. And I came up with a poem that I call In the Back Seat of His Chevy. It's a schematonic poem, so well, you'll see. The big fate, a hot date. Oh, I have to warn you, it gets a little racy. Sorry. The big fate, a hot date. He couldn't wait. Pulled out too late. Call it fate. Though they denied, innocence belied. The rabbit died. So, side by side, the knot they tied. Shotgun bride. Her parents cried. The bride wore white, a lovely sight. They danced all night. It worked out right. 9 months later, twins, he cried. Ooh. So they named them Joy and Pride. That was their story. Now, I'm not sure where to go from here because I had two different directions and both of them made sense to me. We've been talking about old friends and we've been talking about Mom and Mother's Day. And I've got both. Being that it's May, I think I'll go with Mom. I have two poems about moms. One is more or less about my own mom and dad, who are both long gone now. And that's not it. It's called, sorry, Merriam-Webster, but polka is a verb. In our household, Sunday morning radio was often a mass, the only church my father attended, followed always by an energetic polka band, the only dance my mother loved. And anyone, yes, Dad, but also everyone entering the kitchen at the appropriate time was caught up in an impromptu laughing twirl across the kitchen floor. Come polka with me! I'm certain wherever they are, she's still laughing as she polkas with Dad, or anyone she can catch. And then I have my second mom, who was the lady next door from me as I was growing up, and she was an amazing lady, and I wanted to introduce you to her. Tall, gangly, red hair and freckles, loud, laughing, big-boned, athletic. One glance could confirm no common blood between us. If she had a totem, it was a giraffe, while mine was a field mouse. Often embarrassed, but rarely outdone, she could sing, belch, and blush with the best of them. Beating the neighborhood boys at football in the street, for none could fathom how to block a lady. Life wasn't always kind, but she was, without exception. And I'm gonna do these. I thought I brought something fun. Yeah, I'm gonna do this guy instead. This guy is not real, although he's a collaboration or a collection of a number of people I have known over the years. The title of it is Old Codger, Newfangled Phone. He butt dials his son every other day, accidentally disconnects his daughter at least once a week. His kids think he doesn't know what he's doing. He knows they track his whereabouts, so he delights in unsettling them with a little surprise now and then. Stopped by a tattoo parlor the Monday past, and last month joined a senior's dating site suggested by a friend. Doubly diverting. That caused some ado, and he met some nice gals too. Kids still think he doesn't know what he was doing, and he's okay with that.
Thank you, Pam.
The next speaker is Fred, and I can't pronounce. How do you pronounce it, Fred?
Feucht.
Feucht. Okay.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Sorry I haven't been here for a while, but it's almost 11 o'clock, so I guess I'll try to read a short story rather than a long one. And this one.
Go to 11:15.
What?
Go to 11:15 or 11.
Okay. Well. So the title of this is The Best Thing That Could Have Happened. And this is about a friend of mine from a long time ago, back in the 70s. His name is Marvin Silvermintz. And he worked for, I was a graphic designer, and I did package design for companies, and one of them was Ideal Toy Company, which was located in Queens. And Marvin was a person, was part of the staff at Ideal Toy Company, and he fit in. Marvin was sort of short, a little chubby. He wore a yarmulke on his head, and he fit into the world of product managers at Ideal Toy who had MBAs and three-piece suits, and he fit in sort of like a Bambi in a grizzly cave. So, Ideal Toy was my biggest account. Let me just see where. Marvin always was a person they called. He was a math major, and he was a person they called when they had some sort of a problem with a game or toy, and he was the person to solve that problem. And the other thing about Marvin is he had a great sense of humor, and he always had a joke to tell. And at the time that I met him, he was experimenting with stand-up comedy. So the big event in the toy industry was was something called Toy Fair, which was when every toy company presented all their new products for the year in February. And every year this was held at the Toy Center, which was at 205th Avenue, and people had been working since September or October, day and night, getting all these new products prepared. And this was a very high pressure time, and the results of Toy Fair really were about the fate of the company, because they had to come out with dozens of new products every year. And it turned out that Ideal Toy hadn't had many winners in Toy Fair recently. So then Ideal Toy was purchased and owned by CBS Broadcasting, and then there was a big hostile takeover, and CBS decided that they had to divest themselves of a lot of losers, and Ideal Toy was one of the losers. So CBS sold off all the Ideal Toy products, and so I found myself without my biggest client, and Marvin found himself without a job. And this seemed like the biggest disaster in my life, was losing my major account. And then about a year after our Ideal Toy closed down, I met Marvin at Toy Fair, and he was going around trying to sell new toys and game ideas, and he wasn't having much luck, and I was going around looking for new toy accounts, and I wasn't having much luck either. But we met on the elevator, and he always had a good joke. But we weren't having much luck. And it seemed to me that Marvin just was not likely to succeed in this world. Then, about 10 years later, I was talking to my old friend named Sue Adamo, who I had known from Ideal Toy Company, and she was now working for Pressman Toy Company. And she said to me, "Did you hear what happened to Marvin?" And I expressed this would probably be bad news. And then what she said was, "Marvin is now the head writer for Jay Leno."
Oh, wow.
I was totally shocked. Marvin had started, to moonlight as stand-up comic, and while he was still at Ideal Toy. A year later, after Sue told this to me, I had a need for somebody to write a humor article. I called up Jay Leno at a show in Los Angeles, and Marvin, remembering, said, "Did you hear that joke that I wrote for Jay last night?" And he said, "If you get out to Los Angeles, I'll get you tickets to the show." So, what this is about is this is really the best thing that could have happened to Marvin. This is the best thing that could have happened to me was getting fired by Ideal Toy, because Marvin ended up with a dream job at as a head writer for Jay Leno, and I ended up at as a job for my dream job at working for a medical education company 3 miles from where I live from home, and it was the best job I ever had in life. So sometimes when things seem like a disaster, it may be the best thing that could have happened to you.
Okay, then, next on our list, Ox.
The mostly mine. 3 years was I, precocious beyond, independence discovering, bicycle without training wheels, venturing out all the way to the end of my block, but street crossing was not allowed. Turned around without wobbling, pedaling back as fast as my little legs could, helmet still in the distant future. 1 gear and me power. Not deprived was I. A few older boys had 3 gears. Too young to be a Cub Scout. No den like my older brother. No uniform or badges. Not even a 2-finger salute. Dad was busy. A dean of something. For me, he created Sea Scouts. Didn't matter that I was the only one. I think it was mostly a Cub Scout uniform with an anchor on my sleeve. My salute was my right forefinger knuckle to the edge of my white cap, which I wore smartly, covering up my entire right eye. For vision's sake, this didn't make any sense. To me, I looked sailor smart. Arr, matey. I was part of something no bigger than me. Dad made a book with nautical tasks and merit badges to achieve, starboard and port and forward and aft, and I learned how to tie a bowline and double half hitch, sheepshanks, and more. In a dark, damp basement, he and I built a wooden pram, a 7-foot long, led by a flat rake bow, 3 thwarts or seats with oarlocks, gleaming white with a red bottom paint. The name, The Mostly Mine, because I helped build it, sand it, and paint it. So it was mostly mine, but others could use it. However, no one ever did. Only I ever commanded my grand vessel. It was nautically Bristol, shipshape if you know what I mean. The mostly mine was finally finished and beamed on the basement cement floor. It was time to start its journey towards water and uncharted adventures. However, because the basement stairs wound around a metal post and then there were very solid walls and creaky stairs, with much effort over what had been hours, we lifted and turned this way and that, all accompanied by several words I had never heard, to the tune of my mommy sternly stating, "Bob! Bob!" The mostly mine almost popped through the side door out onto the driveway on its way towards launching. To Lake Winnipesaukee we drove, the mostly mine upside down atop the car. No wasted champagne for christening, my parents were teetotalers. In the water, it stood sound and proud, and gently bobbed up and down with each wave. Towed behind a double-plank mahogany Chris-Craft, the family's summer place on Pine Island, its destiny. As the skipper of my very own yacht, I took her out on a maiden voyage. Quickly I got the hang of rowing, and my vessel delighted in the sunlit, bouncing waters. only allowed about 50 yards from the dock, to a tiny cove beach protected by blueberry bushes. My secret private place I named Pirates Cove. Yet I was fairly sure no pirates had ever set foot on my beach. A couple of years later, a 3-horsepower Evinrude engine powered my grand yacht, zipping to and fro. Spinning on a dime with a flat bow, slapping water over the gunnels, sprayed to light my freckled face and bright red hair. Ah, what memories from decades past. So vividly I recall how I sat so tall and proud, joyfully invincible, a crew of only one. For hours on end I drove my friend. After I left the army, the summer place was sold. With no place to take her, behind I left the mostly mine. With grand memories, I hoped another young lad, or maybe a lass, would find grand adventures in my little yacht. A couple of years ago, I visited the lake place. The newest owners had placed the mostly mine as a centerpiece to the beautiful rock garden for endless land-based voyages, decades in the future.
Thank you so much, Ox. What a lovely story. And I hope you'll join us with Ahoy Sailors, because I know that Ox has quite a history. And now Bob has the closing fun for you.
Found this among papers that you go through sometimes. You wait to sort things too late, but I found this among it. It's a medical dictionary, and it's in alphabetical order. So we start with an artery. That's the study of paintings. A bacteria is the back door to the cafeteria. Barium, what doctors do when treatment fails. A cesarean section, it's a district in Rome. A CAT scan, searching for your kitty. Cauterize, made eye contact with her. Colic, a sheepdog. Coma, a punctuation mark. Congenital, friendly. D&C, where Washington is. Dilate, is to live long.
That's a catchword.
Enema, not a friend. Fester, quicker. Fibula, a small lie. A GI series, it's a soldier's ball game. Impotent, distinguished and well known. A labor pain, getting hurt at work. Nitrate, cheaper than the date rate. An outpatient, who's a patient that fainted. Pap smear, it's a fatherhood test. Pelvis, a cousin of Elvis. Post-operative, a letter carrier. Prostrate, flat on your back. Recovery room, place to do upholstery. Rheumatic, amorous. Secretion, hiding something. And a seizure, it was a Roman emperor. Tablet, a small table. A terminal illness. Getting sick at the airport. Tibia. It's a country in North Africa. Tumor. More than one. Urine. The opposite of you're out. And varicose, nearby. Okay, our next meeting is
June 2nd.
June 2nd. You might put in a plug for Golden, the play put on by the Theater Guild, coming up a week from this, week from today, for 3 performances, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, written by 2 Heritage Villagers and performed by Heritage Villagers.
Yeah.
And hope you all enjoyed. We thank you for coming out and appreciate you coming.
See you in June. Happy May.
Yep.
Happy
Yep.
pool
Best
openings.
of monologues
That'll be coming up in the fall.
in the fall.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. And we'll do it again. That's for sure. Yep. Thank you all, though. It's so much fun.